Good evening, everyone. I'm starting a new interview, and today it's an American conductor, Case Scaglione, who is now working in Europe and who is now the chief conductor of Orchestre National d'Île-de-France. And I'm waiting for Case to join us so that we could have this talk. It's the first Instagram talk for him.
Am I late?
Well, just 1 minute.
Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you for being here. I hope you're enjoying the déconfinement in Paris.
Yeah, the déconfinement is definitely much better than staying at home all the time. And
Mhm.
I appreciate the invitation. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Yes, we will talk about your career, and then maybe in the end, you will describe the current situation and maybe your plans for summer if things are starting to happen. So I guess my first one, I've only been to America once, and I'm not aware of how musical education there happens. So could you tell us where you were born and how did you start your musical studies? What are they like in the States?
Well, talking about any topic vis-a-vis the United States is difficult because it's such a big country.
Mhm.
I was lucky in the sense that I'm from Texas originally. I was born in a place called Port Arthur. My family moved to Houston, uh, the biggest city in Texas, when I was 7 or 8 years old. So I basically grew up in Houston, in the suburbs of Houston. And there is a huge emphasis, for one reason or another, on music education there. And I come from a non-musical family, and I figured out early from kind of playing the harmonica and messing around on the piano a bit that I had some kind of musical talent. So my parents took me to school to go meet the band director, and they put me on trombone. They lied to my mother and said that they put all their smartest kids on trombone. And I think the reality is they just needed more trombone players. But no, we grew up in a kind of paradise in this sense. As I've grown up and gone, to different levels, to conservatory and then to the professional world, I find so many of my colleagues that I went to school with. In the all-state band, the guy sitting to my left in the performance is now playing trombone for the Metropolitan Opera. The guy
Mm.
sitting to my right is now principal trombone of the San Francisco Symphony.
Good
Um,
connections.
no, seriously. I mean, it's funny to say it because I think Texas is not really viewed that way in popular culture. A colleague in the Detroit Symphony and I played in region band together, and on and on. So, I mean, in that sense, I was really lucky. And in addition, of course, to this system, I had two wonderful music teachers, both in middle school as well as in high school. And particularly my high school teacher recognized that I had the kind of drive to be able to do this for like a career, for a life. And he really went out of his way to help me and to teach me about scores and to point me in the right direction as I was looking for a music school to go to. And yeah, I think it's probably the thing that I'm the most grateful for in my development, that I was brought up in this community where music was so emphasized.
And is there a certain point when something in you, an idea sparkled that I'm becoming a conductor rather than instrumentalist? And a linked question, can you be a theoretical conductor only without being an instrumentalist first?
A theoretical conductor is in
Well,
not.
in a way that you don't play any instrument.
Well, I don't think so.
Mhm.
And I think that the principal requirement for any conductor is a feeling of empathy. This is very important in leading people musically. And even on a personal level, this is important. But getting back to your question about learning an instrument first, you need to understand how hard it is to do what you're asking your colleagues to do.
Mhm.
Um, there's an understanding of the struggle that people go through to make a certain passage work. that I don't think comes any other way than having struggled yourself and sweat through passages to try to make something sound effortless. So I think that it is a vitally important aspect to becoming a conductor. This aspect of one's music training and instrument.
Did you want to kind of take a broader sweep of other repertoire rather than for trombone in your move to become a conductor? What was the leading force, the guiding force behind it?
This is the thing. I mean, I think the issue, the trombone is a wonderful instrument, but its repertoire is somewhat limited. So fairly early on, I started hanging out with string player friends and studying string quartets, particularly in college. I really did this. But it must have been in intermediate school, kind of 12, 13 years old, that I started to order scores and look through them. I remember my first music teacher played Mahler's First Symphony for me. And I was just completely transported to another world by the beginning of this symphony. And I couldn't believe that sounds could manipulate our emotions so much as to literally put us in another place. So one of the first scores I ever bought was this Dover score of Mahler's First Symphony. Of course, I spoke no German at the time, so there were all these very cryptic messages from Mahler himself and transpositions that I didn't understand. But I was so in love with the material that I made it my life's work, even at that early age, to be able to dig into and understand this music. And I think that was really my entry point into the repertoire.
Conducting is such sort of like a sacred job. Nobody knows what's going on, and how
even us sometimes don't know. Yeah,
and how to become one. Could you sort of desacralize it for us, maybe at least several steps that one could do at least to become an amateur conductor? What are actually the things to do?
Well, what's so difficult about arts in general is that nobody's path is the same, and I think for conducting it's even more so. People develop at different rates, and what one should do with their talent or interest is going to vary on a person by person basis. But I think the things that I would say that are kind of non-negotiable is to learn an instrument, of some kind, to study different kinds of repertoire, and perhaps most of all, to observe rehearsals. Being in Houston, I had the opportunity to listen to the Houston Symphony during the Christoph Eschenbach years, This was kind of a Camelot era with the Houston Symphony, and I was in my very developmental phase at the time. And I would go and watch rehearsals, not just with Christoph, but with other conductors as well. And I was so surprised at the many different ways that conductors could get wonderful results. That was a very liberating thing to me, that it wasn't so much that one had to say the right thing. It was that in order to be an effective conductor, one needs to understand what's going on with the music, and that the way that you express this with the human empathy that we talked about varies from person to person, and people vary hugely in technique as well. There are great, very famous conductors who weren't so detail oriented in their approach to rehearsal, but somehow got the most amazing results. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have many conductors who are taskmasters and very meticulous in the way that they rehearse the orchestra, who also get wonderful results. So, being aware of that entire spectrum, that kind of blank canvas to work on, and being able to choose what I liked from everybody's different style to kind of develop my own, I found to be crucial.
Is it difficult to learn the technicalities, to read the score, to hear the music without listening to it, to know all the notations in different languages, all the tempi? Is this area difficult to master?
Well, the technical aspect of conducting, not so much. This is not what's hard. What I think is difficult is the psychological aspect, knowing what to say. Even more importantly, knowing what not to say, to know, everyone processes information differently. And there's sometimes that you know, an orchestra is just, they're kind of feeling each other to find the moment, and to interject one's opinion in the middle of that might cause more damage than good. And as far as, you know, as far as reading the score, it's like anything else. I mean, it's like it's like learning a language. I think there's a lot of difficult work at the beginning of it, but eventually it starts to come, and there's no how could I say, no translation time in doing it. When you do it long enough, you look at it, you have a sense of how it sounds. And being able to hear music, I think this is something that comes organically after time of interacting with the material. It's just, it's an issue of time. That's it.
Did you leave Houston to further your education? Did you go to some higher music school in the States afterwards?
I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music to study music performance, trombone.
So you actually continued to do the trombone education?
I did. It's what I got my degree in.
And then?
After that, I went to the Peabody Institute to study conducting before I got my first job with the debut orchestra in Los Angeles.
So your bio says that you had your mentors such as Alan Gilbert and who else? Zinman, right?
David Zinman, Jaap van Sveden, I would say, is probably fair.
Yes, I see. So are they, when you say mentors, were they part of your study course, or mentors when you were already, say, at the New York Philharmonic with Gilbert, right? Probably there, yeah?
Well, you know, there's that old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I think we find these people in our lives at the times that we need them. I would say, you know, of course, Gustav Meyer was my conducting teacher in school at Peabody. And David Zinman was really the one that opened up the world of the idea of professional conducting to me. He was my teacher at Aspen. And I learned so much from him in the way of working with an orchestra at a kind of professional level. He had already recorded all of the 9 Beethoven symphonies with the Tonhalle Orchestra, and he did an amazing amount to teach me how to lead an orchestra, kind of what to say, and it was vital to my growth. And I'm so grateful to him, and I still keep in touch with him to this day. And then, of course, I met Alan Gilbert as his assistant at the New York Philharmonic. I was already kind of conducting professionally at the time, and with Alan, Alan really taught me what it meant to actually do the job. I mean, the shock for me when I got to New York was the volume of material that Alan was dealing with as the music director of an orchestra like the New York Philharmonic. We grow up in these incubators as young conductors, you know, and we're taught to learn our, you know, the second movement of a Mozart symphony, and we come back and, you know, we conduct the thing, and this was good, that wasn't. And the amount of repertoire that Alan was having to do with the New York Phil, I just, you know, most times was just praying that he didn't get sick. You know, I remember we were doing something like, it was some enormous program, some huge Strauss piece on a normal subscription concert. And then the orchestra took a break in the middle of the week, okay? And we had, I think, 2 rehearsals in the middle of all of that to go play Mahler 6 in Carnegie Hall, and then come back and finish the subscription week. And the way that Alan managed that, it really set the bar for me with the idea of what my capabilities had to be with regard to facility and to repertoire. Alan was also, you know, a wonderful accompanist. I watched him do all 5 Beethoven piano concertos with Yefim Bronfman, and he didn't miss an entrance the whole week with all 5 of the. I mean, they were all just bang on, and I thought, you know, so that was a great example for me. And Jaap van Sveden I met at Tanglewood when we shared a program together as part of the TMC program, which is like the parallel to the Boston Symphony Young People's Program. And we would have a professional conductor come in basically weekly, and we would borrow the guest conductor of the Boston Symphony. And, you know, 2 of the students would conduct half of the program, and the professional conductor would do the second half of the program. And I remember it was Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, and Jaap wasn't so well known at the time. I mean, he was doing, he had just kind of started in Dallas, I guess. He had kind of gotten going. And I remember after the very first rehearsal, I called my wife, and I said, my wife, Tony, and I said, remember this name, Jaap van Zweden. This guy is the real thing. And she said, Jaap who? I said, Jaap van Zweden. And of course, it sounds funny now, but that was great because I really, he took me under his wing in a wonderful way as well. And what I learned from him was this very detailed way of rehearsing. Of course, he was a concertmaster of the Concertgebouw Orchestra, you know, at a very early age, you know, 18 or 19, something like this. So what I got from him was this very technical way to speak to string players that would take something that was already pretty good and make it just magnificent. And yeah, and I think I still keep in touch with all three of these guys. You know, I love them dearly, and all of them were very important in my development as a conductor. I think particularly for conducting, it's important that we have mentors. You know, people that not only can show you which way to go, but people that have been there before you have. That's a wonderful thing, and I really lucked out in the mentor department, and I'm so grateful to them all.
Now that you have mentioned it, what is the way to spot a future star in conducting?
You know,
what do you pay attention to?
You know, I don't know. It's you know, one could say that it's a kind of a charisma, for lack of a better term. This doesn't mean that somebody needs to be Tom Cruise, because, you know, one could also be very, very introverted and not so much an A-type personality, and then of course the other side as well. But one needs to be a great musician, because ultimately, however your rehearsal or conducting style may differ from other conductors, the point of the job is to be able to connect with people and to convince them, and to be able to facilitate a space where they can be the best versions of themselves. And apart from being a great musician, I think the rest of it can vary greatly.
And do you have to be a young one to be a starting shooting star in conducting business?
No, take Jaap for instance. I mean, most conductors start young, but you know, Jaap started as a violinist. I don't think he started conducting until he was 35 years old. And I think when he told his dad that he was gonna, you know, that he was gonna try conducting, his father was so upset because he was gonna lose his pension, you know, with the orchestra. So no, I think it's a very personal thing. And, you know, it's there's a lot of punditry in our business. You know, we talk about, well, you know, an Italian orchestra with a French conductor, an American orchestra with a German conductor. But the fact of the matter is that in the moment, all of that goes away, and it depends very much on the person, which I think is a good thing.
Could you describe your first job, the point when I interrupted you with other question? I understand that it was a youth orchestra, right?
Yes.
In Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's called.
Yeah. What are the specifics of working with an orchestra that we would say kind of exists together with the more well-known one, the LA Phil? What is the place of another orchestra within this scheme?
What do you mean, as far as the difference between working with young musicians as opposed to professionals?
Well, I kind of thought that you come to the city and people, like the mass audience, would know the LA Phil. How do you make your orchestra known? What kind of place does another orchestra hold in the city, which is based on one famous orchestra?
Well, you know, Los Angeles is a city that has a wealth of culture and of things going on. And yeah, I think it's not exactly right to think of it in terms of, you know, you have one orchestra and that was it. The YMF debut orchestra was founded, God, it must have been, you know, 60 years ago now. Michael Tilson Thomas was there as a young man. Andre Previn conducted them. I mean, there's a great tradition of music directors that got their start there. What was so special about the debut orchestra, I mean, one could call it a youth orchestra, but what it was, in fact, was a pre-professional training orchestra. So these weren't 16-year-olds. They were mostly undergraduate and postgraduate students up to a certain age who wanted an orchestral experience apart from their normal conservatory education, so that they could get through repertoire and they could gain experience. And we enjoyed a wonderful amount of support with that orchestra, because the debut orchestra had a great name in Los Angeles and held a very, very special place in the cultural life of Los Angeles, because people knew that they were going to get great performances from that group, and they were also playing very interesting repertoire. For me, I kind of I had a lot of wiggle room with regard to programming. We started a program that I think exists until this day, called 360-degree music, with the debut orchestra, where we would take programs and make these kinds of projects to go into the inner city and lesser served part of the community in order to present this wonderful music that we enjoy. From a repertoire side, I was allowed to be a little bit risky. We did the first ever staged opera there. We did Act 2 of Tristan and Isolde, and I guess it was kind of made enough noise that was what got me an invitation to the New York Philharmonic. I think that's what got Alan's attention to extend me an invitation to do it. But it was a very important training ground, because I was with colleagues of mine that were my age, and it allowed me to fill the room with mistakes and mess up and stumble and have a chance to learn this music with people who were in my age group. And it gave me a very good foundation to start with professionals, where of course the margin for error is much smaller. You know, when you
yes. Did you have a mentorship there? And I wanted to ask, I've been to Los Angeles last summer actually, and I wondered, could you describe what kind of a music scene is the city is, maybe as compared now you kind of look at it as a flashback after your European experience and maybe a New York experience. Why Los Angeles is considered the second cultural center after New York?
Well, people in Chicago might argue with you. That's up to date. No, but there's no question Los Angeles has a lot going on. What makes Los Angeles such an interesting and dynamic city, as opposed to most of the other ones that are on the East Coast, has to do with the weather and the movies, and there's an entirely different vibe. I mean, for instance, the Hollywood Bowl itself is a cultural institution that is just there's nothing like it. I mean, of course, Tanglewood is a nice kind of summer festival, but it was wonderful to go get to hear the Los Angeles Philharmonic in the Hollywood Bowl in summer, and you could sit down at these tables in weather that you knew was going to be perfect every day, no matter what. And you could hear anything from John Williams to a Mahler symphony and have people serve you food, as you sat there. There's a huge gigging culture in LA. I mean, I think in all big cities there's a big gigging culture, but particularly for the movies, there's a lot of last minute call ups to have people step in at the last minute and to play a lot of these recordings. And then of course you have the regular season of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and of course the Los Angeles Opera, which is the first place that I saw my very first Ring cycle was there. So yeah, that's why it's a huge city. It's a dynamic city. They've invested a lot in music, and there's a lot to be experienced there.
So now we are moving to your assistant conductorship, and you will have to describe us what do you do as an assistant conductor, and whether it how to say is a pinch to your ego to be an assistant rather than a conductor of your own.
No, I mean, if I ever had any pinch to my ego, which I don't think I did, about 3 seconds into the door of watching an orchestra like the New York Philharmonic, one learns fairly quickly how much we have to learn. So it was nothing like that. Yeah, with an orchestra like that, as I said, the repertoire is just enormous. You're there covering for the music director in case he gets sick, and also for the guest conductors. So it's really a time to churn through repertoire. at an incredible pace and to hope that no one gets sick. It's,
or to hope as it
yeah.
might be your star hour, right?
Yeah, I did. I had to step in some pretty strange conditions, and it wasn't even sick. It was it's really funny. Kurt Masur was conducting the New York Phil, as he did every year, and the program was the Brahms Double Concerto and Brahms Second Symphony. This is his wheelhouse. This is his repertoire. And the original scheduled soloist was Carter Bray, the principal cello of the New York Philharmonic, and Glenn Dicterow, the concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic. Week starts out like any other. It's fine. We have our first performance. It's good. I lived on 96th Street, and I would take a cab later than I should have to come down to the hall. And, I got to back up. Before the dress rehearsal, Carter Bray hurts his hand and can't play. Luckily, Elisa Weilerstein is close by, and she steps in for the dress rehearsal the day of the first concert. She's a pro, so she nails it. Sounds great. Okay, so we have new cellist Elisa Weilerstein, Glenn Dicterow. They played the Brahms double. Sounds fantastic. Great. The next day, I believe it was must have been a Friday night, I started heading down in a cab later than I should have been heading down, and I get a call from the artistic administrator saying, Kurt Masur is stuck in traffic, and you're on. Yeah. So let's say the concert's at 8. This is 8:40. This is 7:41.
And you say that you're also stuck in traffic, right?
No, I did not say that. I needed the job badly. Oh yes, of course. I'm just downstairs getting dressed now. No. So let's say the concert's at 8. This is at 7:41 or something. Okay, and I'm like on 72nd Street, a few blocks away. Oh my God. So I run through the door. I get stumbling trying to get my tuxedo on. And what's funny is, no one cancels at the New York Philharmonic. No one cancels, no matter how sick they are. They always show up to conduct. So the tuxedo that I kept to wear in case of emergency was like this Al's formal wear rental piece of junk that was wrinkled and had been in the back of my office for 2 years. And you can still see from the pictures how ill-fitting and wrinkled this poor suit was. It was just amazing. So I'm like jumping, trying to get my socks, everything on, the whole thing. So I come downstairs. Elisa Weilerstein is there, ready to walk out. And Glenn Dicterow at this point, who has already had a hell of a week because Carter Bray canceled, Glenn Dicterow comes down and sees me standing there in white tie and tails and my baton. And he looks at me and he goes, "What the hell are you doing here?" I'm like, Glenn, I said, "I'm sorry, man. I'm conducting the gig. He's stuck in traffic." And the only thing I remember from that, my wife was uptown, like meeting a friend or something. So I made my subscription debut with the New York Philharmonic in front of a bunch of strangers. There was nobody that I knew that was there, not that I knew. And so, and just before we walked out, Elisa Weilerstein turns to me and she says, "Have you ever done this before?" And I said, "Just walk out. We'll talk about it later." But I survived.
Were you? Do you remember this composer in residence things that Alan did? I think Magnus Lindberg had it.
Christopher Rouse.
Yes, was
Christopher
one
Rouse.
of. Could you describe how he worked with composers who were part of these programs? And and you, what was your part in it also? Yeah.
Well, like most things, I was just an observer, to kind of see that I knew that I had in some way my hand on the process, that in case someone had to cancel, that I knew sort of what was going on. But I was very lucky in the sense that Alan had a very open door policy with us, and he wanted us around all the time. This was very generous of him. And so
yeah. You are a bit stuck.
Okay. Let me try to quit and come back.
Well, if
I'm back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got some policy update for Instagram. Anyway, so yeah, Alan had a very open door policy with us, and he
Mm-hmm.
wanted us. He he had had an assistantship like ours with Christophe von Dohnanyi at the
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland Orchestra, and I think he really kind of wanted to recreate that same experience for us. And so I got to be there when he was talking to a lot of these composers before sometimes even the pieces were written, just to kind of be there and hear what they had to say to each other during dinners before these projects ever
Mm-hmm.
were a reality. And you know, Alan is so good in new music and has so much flexibility between different styles of composers. It was great. I mean, he always had the composers there, you know, throughout the entire process,
Mm-hmm.
and was very flexible and open to what what they needed as far as how they thought the score should sound. And I found that a very admirable quality that I've tried to keep with me, because you know it's one thing, you know, when you're doing a Beethoven symphony or something like this where there's tradition, but with something new like this and it's open, you know, having a living composer is almost in a way like having a soloist. You know,
Mm-hmm.
their wishes and how they want it to sound are very important, and this takes a special kind of preparation, you know, to be able to learn the score, but also to leave the door open to the possibility that you might be doing something that the composer might want done differently.
Mm-hmm. Did you take this interest in modern composers with you to your future jobs? What's your disposition to contemporary music?
I love new music. I always loved new music. We did a lot of new music back even before I was at the New York Philharmonic in Los Angeles. I
Mm-hmm.
was always interested in composers and what people were writing. And we live in such an interesting postmodern period that we have things that are a spectrum from, you know, Boulez on the one end to John Adams on the other, and everything in between. Kind of nothing is off limits.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. I'm always looking for interesting new voices and and yeah, also just exploring the music that's been written over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I love
Mm-hmm.
to do it as much as possible.
Well, now we have to fly over the pond, sort of metaphorically, and imagine your appearance in Europe. How did that happen?
Very strange. So I they were very nice to me in New York, and they said, look, you know, you can kind of stay here. We would like to have you stay on, as then I'd been promoted to associate conductor. Um, and it was difficult because my wife and I had a life in New York. We considered ourselves New Yorkers.
Mm-hmm.
She had a job. I had what I felt was like a family at the New York Philharmonic, and they were very generous and giving me opportunities, and also the players would give me advice. And this was a very comfortable situation, but I always knew that, you know, in order to be a music director, I was going to have to take a leap of faith, basically. So I got myself um, European management at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my wife that we're going to move to Berlin. And she said,
Just like this,
just
yeah.
like this. I said, honey, you're going to love it. We're moving to Berlin. And she said, well, why? You know, we've got, and I finally won her over. You know, she agreed, and I knew that if I wasn't there, because there are so many opportunities here in Europe, that unless I made the move, I wouldn't be exposed to the kind of things that are going on
Mm-hmm.
in Europe. And so we did that. I had no job, nothing but kind of guest conducting gigs, and we moved to Berlin. And it was that very first year that we were there, that randomly somebody I had met on a gig somewhere, who played with the Württembergisches Kammerorchester in Heilbronn. They had a cancellation. Their music director was sick, and they just invited me. And you know, thankfully, I was in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
If I was in New York, I wouldn't have been able to make it on time. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a really lucky situation. And so I went down there and conducted them, and it was really you know, kind of a love at first sight situation. And that then the Heilbronn job happened, And the French orchestra, which I had met in March of my first year abroad, so to speak, had a wonderful week with them. I'd said to my wife when we were here, oh, could you imagine how wonderful it would be to be able to have this orchestra? I loved them so much, and it was, but we forgot about it. We say, oh well, we'll get a guest conducting spot there sometime in the next couple of years, and well, one thing led to another, and they ended up offering me that job as well. So now I've kind of have my roots firmly planted in France and Germany, and that brings us to today.
So next time you want to change a job, you just say to your wife, so look, that orchestra sounds nice.
Yeah. Well, we have to try St. Petersburg next. That's the
well, you might not like it here. It's not so vibrant, I must say,
Hey,
compared to
I love
Europe.
St. Petersburg. I've visited a couple times. I stayed in Nevsky Prospect when I was there.
Yeah, but what I'm saying that, our music scene is more Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, and all the big classical people, not the vibrant life of Europe. Like for me, it was only in London that I discovered the contemporary
Yeah.
music. But could you describe to me the music scene in Germany? I have to admit, I haven't heard of this orchestra before I was preparing to this interview. So it seems that there are many chamber orchestras in different länder in Germany, yes? So it's not only the biggest players like Berliner Philharmoniker and I don't know who else. So what is the role of the chamber orchestra like yours in the general musical scheme of the country? Yeah.
Well, I think it's fair to say that classical music is held in a higher regard by both the government and society at large in Germany than in any other country. The societal emphasis on music and also the support that they get is like nothing I've ever seen. So what this means is that you can't go 10 kilometers down the road without tripping over some small town that has a phenomenal orchestra. The education is very good, and the level is generally high, and they've really got a sense of tradition. In our town, in Heilbronn, we're I'd say probably an hour's drive outside of Stuttgart in Baden-Württemberg. They've got a very rich recording history with Deutsche Grammophon, and they were founded in 1960 by Jörg Faber. And they play a very important role in the in our town. I find it hard to believe, but I think we're a town of 100,000 people, Heilbronn, and we have 2,000 subscribers with the orchestra. So if you just imagine that 2% of the city are our subscribers. And all of our subscription concerts are sold out or nearly sold out. And this kind of support is very moving to someone like me who comes from a place like the United States, where I think it's safe to say that it's a little bit more specialized where we come from. But in Germany, it's literally woven into the fabric of society. It's not normal. It's not unusual to see somebody in Berlin who's on a date, someone in their 30s or 40s, to stumble by and see that they've got some sort of deal at the Staatsoper and to go watch an opera. So I think in this sense, you really can't compare Germany to any other place.
But how do you cater for your audience in your city? On the one hand, one would say that you are probably trying to monitor what they like and to give them what they expect, and on the other hand, it's difficult to be radical with also like because you are too tightly together in one small place. So how do you actually find your balance with innovation and tradition?
Well, I don't think it's an either or situation, and in fact, I think that we've been successful in programming in a very balanced way. That on the one hand, we view the German romantic repertoire and classical repertoire as this kind of core to the repertoire, and that's what our audience has come to expect from us. they have a long, illustrious tradition, years and years before I was here, of recording these great works, and playing with people like Anne-Sophie Mutter and Frank-Peter Zimmermann, and there's a great tradition there. But there's always room to add new things. We'll be playing all 3 Ligeti concertos, for instance, leading up to the Ligeti's birthday in 2022. Bryce Dessner has written a world premiere for us, which we will be playing in September. When it is, it's not this one coming, but the one after. And I've found that our audience has been very receptive. I never leave them alone with a new idea. So that's to say, no matter how conservative or radical the piece is, I always like to give an introduction to them to explain the context of how the piece was written, but more importantly, how the music relates to what else is on the program. And we've gotten very, very positive feedback. I mean, you've got conservative people in every audience for sure, but I think for the most part, we've done a good job in striking a good balance there.
Are you free in your planning, or do you have somebody like a CEO, like in the States, who would supervise your work, or maybe the orchestra has the right to influence your decisions also? Who is the one who is responsible?
Well, nobody really in Europe or the United States has complete programming autonomy, because there's always many different things to put together, and it's not so much about the wishes of the conductor so much as it is balancing what the orchestra has recently played, what the repertoire things are, what the soloist is bringing. Things are very democratic in Germany. We have an Orchestervorstand, which is like kind of like a, how do you say, I guess the advisor, like
a representative, yeah.
Exactly, like an advisory that we discuss all of these programs. And also, I like a lot of give and take as well. You don't want to just force a bunch of programs down the orchestra's throat because you think it's a good idea. I actually enjoy this this conversation and back and forth. But you're always balancing in a way. What sells, what's innovative, what have we played, what should we be doing. It is very rarely that we're starting just from scratch so that we can say we'd like such and such soloist and this and this and this. So it's always a give and take. And I would say in France it's the same thing. Of course, in Paris it's a bit different for us because we're a state orchestra. We are an orchestra of the region, so we're balancing a much larger audience base than most other orchestras.
Well, it's time to turn to Orchestre National d'Île-de-France. Also, my question is, what role it has relative to, say, Orchestre de Philharmonie de Paris, and I don't know, I'm actually not so well aware of all other orchestras because I've been visiting Paris, but not so often. So could you describe now what place your orchestra has in the...
Well, I'm very proud of our mission at ONDIF. First and foremost, I want to say that this is a first-class orchestra, and the playing and their commitment to excellence and to being better, and no matter how good it is, always trying to take it one notch higher, is why I fell in love with them and why I took this job. The place that it holds in Paris is a very special one, but it's not just an orchestra for Paris. We are first and foremost an orchestra for the entire region, Orchestre National d'Île-de-France. That's our job. So we, I think, can take more risks and think out of the box in a way more than some of the more kind of older established orchestras in Paris can. And also, we have the wonderful joy of going to every corner of this vast part of France to play repertoire at a first-class level to people who normally don't get to hear music like this. We can go to the smallest, most remote part of the region and play Act 1 of Valkyrie, and that is a joy. Of course, getting to play in the Philharmonie de Paris is an honor, and we love our audience in Paris. They're very dedicated to us, and they always show up and they're cheering loudly for us. But but to get to show someone their first Beethoven Eroica symphony, it's really, you can sense this, and getting to be an ambassador for music in this way puts us in touch with our roots and why we do what we do in a way that people might not be able to in another context.
Mm-hmm. What were the things you learned in these two last jobs, and what were the challenges of, say, the things that you didn't think that were difficult, but you had to deal with for the first time?
The thing that's difficult being music director, and nothing can prepare you for this, is hearing yourself say the same things over and over. You know, when a sentence is half out your mouth, and you think, I'm sick of hearing this. You know, they must be really
so
sick
you
of hearing
have
this.
to say some things for the press and all this stuff,
No,
right?
no, I'm talking about actually in rehearsal. You know, I think, you know, my poor musicians, they must be sick of hearing me say this, and this thing. And I think the biggest challenge is finding a way to challenge the orchestra in new ways that keeps it interesting for them. I think there's this view of conductors that we have this complete power, and nothing could be further than the truth, because our only currency with the orchestra is their want to play for us. And that's a very precious thing. So not only are we the people that have to set the standard to say it has to be such and such good, but while doing that, you need to be very careful not to destroy the precious trust that you have from them, and their want to play for you. Because the moment that they don't want to play for you anymore, it's over. So this is you know, a conductor cannot be effective in this way. And I think finding that balance is always a challenge, particularly as the relationship progresses.
I now wanted to describe, say, a hypothetical, whatever, take the concert, say, Beethoven 4/3. So say you have a soloist, you have an orchestra, and I'm, you know, as an anthropologist of art, I'm interested in what goes in your mind. What exactly goes through your mind when you are conducting, say, a famous piece with a soloist? Where does your attention go? Who do you listen to? How quick? How many times you have to change your focus from the score to certain people? So, can you describe maybe just the general things that are happening in your mind?
Well, I would say probably the greatest challenge in the act of performing as a conductor is staying right now, staying in the moment. And you know, anyone who's ever tried to meditate understands how difficult it is to sit still in the moment without taking notice of things around you and anticipating what's coming in the minute that's coming. And that's the most challenging thing. So ideally, you're in this kind of flow state where you're just listening. In fact, if you're consciously switching from the score to this group of musicians to the pianist, you're either not in the right mindset or unprepared. So the idea is to get to a level of preparedness and to learn the notes and the material so well that you can forget it. And that's the idea, is that we hope to forget these things so that we just can experience the moment as it happens. It sounds easy, but it takes a lot of practice, and something that I'm always trying to get better at.
Well, the one who is used to meditation would argue that in meditation nothing external happens, while with you everything happens.
Yeah, it's interesting. Conducting, I always say, is both an active and a passive activity at the same time, because you're, of course, leading people, so you have to be ahead of them slightly. But in fact, to win an orchestra over in a minute, and I don't mean emotionally, I mean to get them to go such and such speed, or to take time, or to be a little bit more flexible at any given moment, the only way to do that is not really through gesture, it's through listening. And this is a very paradoxical thing, because as a student, when one starts to lose control, you have the feeling that you need to do more. And actually what you need to do is less. And this is something that comes with experience, of course, because it's a completely counterintuitive reaction to such a fluid thing happening in the moment.
Do you believe in kind of transcendental nonverbal communication if you judge it by your experience? So can you communicate things without words? And
Oh,
actually,
I mean,
yeah.
if I didn't believe in this, I would have to choose a different job. You know, the power of suggestion and this very beautiful and complex connection and communication between human beings. And the nonverbal thing that you talk about, this is the part of conducting that can't be taught, because for any rule that a conductor gives you, a conducting teacher, to do this or not do that, there's always some exception to that rule that is predicated on the human connection. I had a conducting teacher told me, you should never point at musicians. Well, you know, that might be a good rule to kind of write down in a rule book, but are you telling me there's no way to point at a musician that's not offensive? You know, I don't think so. It depends on the context. It depends on the person, the moment, the relationship that you have with the musician. And that's, you know, this is something that you're always gauging, not only just over a lifetime, but also minute to minute as well.
How do you work with the soloist? I saw that you like to work with two of the Russian soloists that I know, Behzod Abduraimov and Yuliana Avdeeva.
Avdiva.
Yes, and also who else? Well, I
Who
have to
knows?
look. Yes, others and others.
Yeah.
Well, how do you sort of choose your preferred soloist, and what do you appreciate in performers that you have worked with?
I appreciate someone that will argue with me about a musical point. You know, I'm looking for someone that really has something to say, and I see accompanying as a very beautiful opportunity to get into someone else's psyche about music and to kind of take a passenger role in someone else's journey. Of course, you know, I know the Rachmaninoff piano concertos, but when I meet a new soloist, they have a completely different experience with this piece. They may have different opinions about how things are paced, and this is so exciting to me because it's like with material that I know, an entirely new world. And if a soloist really has something to say and is convincing and knows how to play like chamber music, I'm very, very likely to like that person.
Well, we have 5 minutes, and probably that wouldn't be such an enlightening task, but I want you to think about what could be actually the really constructive ways for us now in the situation that unexpectedly everyone is in to start doing music again.
Well, we're doing it in different ways. In Germany, the WKO Heilbronn is just now started opening up again. We had the idea of, there's a brand new hotel that's opened in town, and we're thinking of having the orchestra play from inside the hotel banisters with the public standing out in front of the hotel. We just had yesterday with On Dief a live streaming concert. And also, I think, you know, concerts with smaller audiences. This is a wonderful way for us to rethink the paradigm, something that I think that has been long overdue. And we will return to normalcy. This is the thing. I get the sense that there's a lot of people that have despair, as if this will never be over. It will be over one day. We don't know how or when, but we are slowly creeping towards normalcy again. And I think that this is a wonderful opportunity, a long overdue opportunity for us to recreate the way that we present music to our public and to find new ways to connect with them, be that through smaller audiences, meeting them in different venues, or through live streaming, which you see is already happening all over the world. So, I mean, I've been very sad to not be making music. But on the other hand, very, very grateful for this opportunity. We had a concert yesterday it's very odd because we played with no audience in our hall with Ondif, and we'd been rehearsing in the hall there all week, and then suddenly the cameras were on, and that was that. We were off and running, and there was this immediate kind of come back to life moment where we felt, yes, this is it. We're all making music again, and yeah, glimmer of hope.
Did you feel it weird when the audiences were not present?
No,
Huh?
actually, because we were so happy to be back together again as a family, and there was that good pressure of a performance that one feels, because we had this sort of collective understanding that this was a concert, and it was a little bit strange afterwards that there was nobody applauding, but in the moment, nothing could have felt more right, actually.
So it was almost like a dress rehearsal in a way, yeah, but with cameras, no?
I guess so, but I have to emphasize, it really felt like a performance. They went to that extra gear that one finds for a performance. So yeah, there was no audience, there were cameras there, but it was a concert, and it'll be available in the next few days, just as quickly as they can put it together. And then after that, we'll be live streaming every week, once a week, until July.
Do you think that this situation, if maybe each country finds its own way out of it, but it will reduce the globalism that music was so much depending on, all these travels of stars, of the soloists, of conductors. So now everyone will have to find their local solutions for a while.
Yeah, and I think this is a good thing. I think we will get back to the kind of jet set idea of conductors and soloists careening all over the globe. But this is great. I'm very lucky to live in two great neighboring countries where I can get back and forth, and I think it's a very good thing. The idea that we could emphasize and support places in our own region. I think that we've had the opportunity to select artists from all over the world in a kind of a la carte manner for the last 40 years. That even if it's temporary, I think it might be a good exercise for us in the short haul. And hopefully, I know for us, okay. Scared I lost you. With both orchestras, we're going to have the opportunity to see exciting new artists that we wouldn't have otherwise seen, and that's a good thing.
Well, I actually appreciate how positive you are, because not all people have been so positive, actually. And what are the things in the next season that you are most looking forward to?
Oh, there's so many things. We've got a world premiere of Bryce Desner's with the VKO Heilbronn in Cologne, which, knock on wood, I hope happens, because he's a genius composer, and I'm just excited to do that with Heilbronn. And I'm recording Don Quixote with Johannes Moser in Paris. We're also doing Mahler 9 in May in the Philharmonie de Paris, as well as around the region. So many things. Also an opera project that I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about yet, but anyway, there is an opera project next year that I'm excited about. And yeah, I'm raring to go. I went through the phase of being heartbroken as 1 week after another was taken. It got to the point where I couldn't study music anymore, because it's too depressing to throw yourself into a score and then to have the project get completely scrapped. But I'm hopeful. I'm looking forward to the projects that we do have, but also sure in a way that we're going to emerge out of this. And to know that in whatever ways our institutions need to adjust, that we're going to do that to continue to bring great music to our public, and I look forward to it.
Well, it's a good way to finish, because Instagram shows we have 50 seconds left.
They're kicking us off? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Greetings from St. Petersburg. Forget what I said. We have Mariinsky and many museums, and please do come with your wife and with everyone. I will make you.
I would love to. Would love it.
So thank you very much. Greetings to Paris, and thank you everyone for watching. It will be saved on my page afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Yulia, for the invitation. I appreciate it.
And hope to see you maybe. Well, I would like to attend this Bryce Desner's premiere. So
you are welcome. We have tickets waiting for you if it
thank
happens.
you. Thank you.
If it happens. Otherwise, we'll go have a beer in Cologne.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
See you, Yulia. Bye-bye.